there, I'm Mindy Jensen.
And I'm Carl Jensen.
And this is the Mindy
and Carl
on Money podcast, where we talk about what happens after you reach financial independence.
Why do we call this show Mindy on Money?
Because Mindy is a bit much.
Mindy. You should have just thrown like 10 more Mindys in there. I know you would have liked that.
That's even more. That's way too much.
How about Mindy to like the power of like 5 million or something? Just
How many people are going to listen to that? Zero. On this episode of Mindy
and Carl
on Money podcast, Carl and I interview our friend
who is right here. What's your name?
Hi. Well, so legally I'm Kristen Knapp, but I use Kristen Cornett professionally. It's my maiden name, right? But Kristen Knapp is kind of what most of the community knows me as.
Okay.
Because that's my legal name. It's kind of confusing. I go by both. Call me whatever you want.
Cool. And I think I know you because we made fun of your career, but we'll talk about that.
Oh, that's a fun story. Do you know
You're so mean. Well, I'm not surprised at all, but even though I just wore my very surprised face,
It's a fun
he's so
story.
mean. All right.
It was mostly Doug. Kristen, you are super interesting. We met at Economy, but I had known about you before that because on my other podcast, I'm going to throw Doug under the rug. See what I did there? Doug had made fun, and I probably did this
You
too.
were both kind of equally insulting.
Okay.
Okay, maybe Doug slightly more.
We insulted your life choice, which is pretty bad. And I was so scared because I think you had sent us some note. I'm like, oh, she's going to be there at Economy. We'll figure that out. And then you weren't. I saw you in the lobby. I remember it then. I'm like, oh, and I'm trying to avoid you, but there you were. So tell us what we did.
Do you want to punch him?
No, it's okay.
Punch.
If I'm being honest, meteorologists are getting used. We're used to being made fun of by the community. I mean, I hear the joke, "Oh, it must be nice to be able to be wrong half the time and still get paid." I mean, I've heard that so much. I've had a quarter for every time. So you were used to it, but you guys didn't know me. I'm going down the rabbit hole podcast. I find your podcast. I listened to a few episodes, and then this one in particular, you guys were just railing on meteorologists about how all the headlines are clickbait and how they're always wrong and. Yeah, so I might have sent a note. I don't remember what that said. I hope I wasn't mean.
No. I hope you were.
I'm sure it was fine. Is Twister your favorite movie? And they're making a sequel?
Yeah, I know. Actually, in all honesty, Twister is very special to me because it came out when I was in meteorology school. Yeah, so we all as a group kind of went to see it. And they actually were really good with the science. There's a lot of tornado type movies out there that the science is like all wrong. So I appreciate Twister.
Since there's a lot of tornado type movies. I guess The Wizard of Oz, right? Like the original tornado movie.
But they're I've seen some B movies where, you would never heard of it, but a tornado moves through a neighborhood and it moves over a house and then all of a sudden everything goes calm. And I'm like, no, that's not what happens no.
You don't go to in The Wizard of Oz, they got sucked up and then they ended up in a magical place. That probably doesn't happen
really
either.
happen. That doesn't really happen.
You end up in a place, but it's underground, not above ground.
That's less accurate. Historically, scientifically speaking.
In all fairness, though, I've always just been really fascinated with weather, which is why I chose this path. When I was a kid, I used to sit on the front porch and watch the storms, and I was always like, yes, bigger, better,
Nice. So you're a fan of tornadoes, it sounds like.
Yeah. No, it's true, though. It is. I have to tell you a funny story. I was at the University of Kentucky. I'm from Lexington. I was pre-med. I started getting into some classes that were pre-med adjacent, and I absolutely hated it. Wasn't interested at all. Like, what am I doing? So I went and met with this career counselor, and she's like, what are your hobbies? I'm working 3 jobs, putting myself through school. I have no time for hobbies. I don't have any hobbies. She says, what gets you excited? And I told her tornadoes. I swear to you, that was my answer. I told her tornadoes. She looked at me a little crazy. I think that's an unusual answer, but she opened up this big giant book because, back then, no internet, right? And she turned to the meteorology section, and the first thing that came up was this broadcast meteorology program at Mississippi State University. And it was like a ton of bricks just fell on me, like this biggest aha moment of my life. And I just wondered, why did I think of this sooner? So I ended up transferring and finishing up there. And I just celebrated 28 years in the TV news business.
Super cool.
Mother's Day weekend was 28 years. Yeah.
And one thing that's neat, I want to throw some love to meteorologists is I just associated all you people on TV with just reading a teleprompter, but you're actually in there doing research and you understand the science. And so before you go on, you're doing tons of background work before that. Standing in front of that thing is hard enough. I didn't want to look through, but you studied it for hours before.
So I have a science degree, right? It's not a journalism degree. I studied the science of meteorology. When I go into work, I figure out the forecast. I make all my own graphics. I do all the presentation. It's all ad lib. We do our own hair and makeup. They don't pay for our clothes. Those are always some of the questions I get.
Yeah.
I thought that too. I thought people would be wanting to send Kristen clothes because you're going to wear them on TV, right? Oh, I want her dressed. It's so cute. But none of that, right?
If you want to send Kristen clothes, email Mindy at mindyonmoney.com and I will connect you with Kristen.
I mean, I get clothes. I didn't get this hat from sitting around doing nothing. Like,
It's the grossest hat.
yeah, don't touch it.
It looks like it smells.
Yeah.
I have
And
to
the
take
listeners, the viewers can smell that hat they can probably taste it from where they're at.
So being a meteorologist is not as glamorous as people assume.
Right. Trying to think what I can say. I do enjoy the puzzle of it all. Like every day's a new day, going in and trying to figure out what's going to happen. Right. I enjoy, people will send me notes and say nice things, and that's wonderful. There's also some weird stuff too, like stalkery kind of stuff. You were talking about some weird stuff happening on Facebook or something, somebody following all Mindy's, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I had a guy not that long ago who reached out to me about a specific dress he hasn't seen me wear in a while, and he wondered if he could buy it from me. And all I'm thinking about is, what would he do with that dress? It's creepy,
he would wear
right?
your skin as a hat.
Yeah. So that can be a little weird. But as a member of this community, I've been saving and investing for a long time, and we don't make nearly as much money as people think. I've been doing it for 28 years, and I've never made six figures. So now I will tell you, there are plenty of people that do, but I don't. And I'm in a pretty decent sized market. I mean, there are people in small market TV still making $25,000 a year, doing weather. Yeah, it's not a really high paying local news, not a real high paying profession.
Is that because there's a lot of people who want to do it? It doesn't sound easy. You've got the science background, you have to be on TV, and it seems like there's a lot of work and a lot of skill. Like a lot of people might be good at being in front of a camera or doing the science, but you have to have it all. But I suppose there's also a lot of people who want to do very few jobs.
There's a couple things. I mean, it still can be pretty lucrative for like the main, like chief meteorologist in some of the bigger markets. But I've been in the business so long, and salaries are pretty well flat, if not maybe going down a little bit. Like when somebody leaves, they bring in the next person and pay them less. And a lot of that has to do with, where do you guys get your weather? Do you sit around and wait for the 5 o'clock news?
No.
Exactly. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. So that used to be what everybody had to do. They had to sit around and wait for the 5 or 6 o'clock news. And then came the internet, and now smartphones. It's all on demand. No one's sitting around. We make money. Well, not we, the TV station makes money by how many people are watching our commercials. And they can charge more to the advertisers if more eyeballs are on the commercials. Well, the number of eyeballs watching TV news commercials continue to go down, 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 down. So it just doesn't make the money that it used to.
Okay. But it's okay for you because you're on the FI path.
I'm on the FI path. Yeah, I'm actually, I very much see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, for sure.
Kristen, you have a very interesting backstory, which you told in a lot of detail on the Earn and Invest podcast that we'll post a link to on here. But can you briefly tell the Mindy on Money audience?
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to say this. People might be like, why is she saying that? But it's true. I'm basically a frat party one night stand baby, basically is what happened. And I was placed for adoption. And I was placed into a very loving home. Always knew that I was loved, but there wasn't much else. So growing up pretty much in poverty, I worried about money a lot. I remember worrying like, oh my gosh, we don't have car insurance and we don't have home insurance. And what is that? I don't know why I worry. Maybe I'm just a worrier. I'm not sure. But it was a very stressful childhood because of the lack of money, being worried about things and what happens if this happens. I don't know. Maybe I'm a what ifer, but it's a lot of stress through childhood for sure. So as soon as I was able to start educating myself, I did. And I remember being like maybe 16 years old and having a subscription to Money Magazine, just trying to educate myself on this stuff.
Wait,
no, that sounds crazy.
You were 16 and had a subscription to Money Magazine. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Or sad?
No,
Awesome.
Here's the deal. I looked around at my family, and I still to this day have a hard time looking around at family members and not understanding why more people don't break free of that. Like to me, I looked around at others who were more successful and didn't struggle. And I was like, that's what I want to be like. I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get educated and I'm going to get a good job and I'm not going to have to worry about money. So, but I didn't have anybody to tell me how to figure this stuff out. So I just kind of, I got the magazine and then, went to college, and I still to this day, like I'm so mad somebody didn't sit down with me and be like, well, try to find scholarships. And this is how you do that. And I just didn't have a mentor. I thought everybody took out student loans because that's just what you did. And it took me so long to get out from underneath that. But yeah, it was a fight. It was a fight. I had a negative net worth probably till about my mid-30s. And I finally turned things positive.
Yeah, I can so relate to your story because I talked to some people now. A friend of ours who we just saw in Las Vegas is like, oh, yeah, when I was 14, my dad sat me down and told me about index funds. And
Wow.
another friend who I went for a hike last week when the Great Recession was happening in 2008, his dad sat him down and said, now is a huge opportunity to put money in the stock market. But similar to you, and it was no fault of my parents, that wasn't their background. They had no idea
Right.
how to invest. And I was the first one in my family to go to college. Like no one else went to college.
As was I.
But I
Mhm.
saw the same thing as you. I don't want to struggle. I want
Right.
money fixes money that won't fix all your stuff, but it'll make life easier, right?
I
Like,
just remember these horror stories of my mom getting really abusive calls from creditors and stuff, and she'd be
Oh.
crying. And I'm like, this is awful. This is not the life that I want. And I'm going to do whatever it takes.
I think that's impressive because a lot of people, their parents make mistakes, and there's even a term for this, like generational trauma. A lot of people pass the trauma from their parents onto their kids, and they just repeat it. And I'm not sure why, because that's a pretty strong teacher. You go through this stuff, and the pain of it being a kid, where it might even be a little worse because you don't feel like you have any control over the
Right.
situation. You don't have a job.
Really
You're just
stressful.
trying to go to school. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Well, to circle back to the whole like being given up at birth thing, in 2019, I met most of my biological family, and this wasn't even that long ago. I was having this conversation with my husband, bringing up again about how I don't understand why nobody in my family that I was raised with, ever was able to break out of this, and why didn't they want better for themselves? And my husband looked at me. He goes, "Kristen, you have different genes." And I'm like, "Huh? Maybe that really plays more into it than we think. Maybe you're adopted, Carl." No, I'm kidding.
Well, you
His
said
name
something.
looked just like his dad.
You said a term that I never heard before, but you said what ifer? Was that the term?
Wait, what did I
A
say?
what ifer?
A what ifer?
Yeah, a what ifer.
And I think I'm like,
Are
that
you
too.
a what ifer?
What if this goes
What
wrong?
if
What if
this
this
goes
goes wrong?
wrong? What if this happens? How can we be prepared? Yes, I totally do that.
Oh my God, are you guys related?
We might be. Maybe I was a drunk frat party child. I'm not sure what to think about that attitude because it makes us stronger. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I wasn't such a
absolutely
worrier.
not.
But on the other hand, it doesn't serve us well now, right?
Right.
Once you've got money, you're like, okay, that was good for a decade or two, but because it caused me to save money. But now, how do you get past that?
Yeah, I always saved just because, like I said, I read Money Magazine and I was like, I knew that I had to at least put the minimum in my 401k to get the match. So even if I was absolutely broke and didn't have two quarters to rub together, I was getting that match, and I always knew to do that. I always knew when I go to an employer, don't cash it out. Like I knew those basic things. But it wasn't until I found the FI community that I learned about index funds and the 4% rule and things like that. So I was kind of living some of those frugal lifestyle parts of it, but I just didn't know the more nuanced, rules, I suppose.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like us. We didn't know anything about index funds, even though we had been investing. We didn't know that an index fund existed. We knew about mutual funds, but they had such high fees
Right.
that we didn't invest in those. And we didn't know about, I'd never heard of the 4% rule. And then all of a sudden, like somebody casually mentioned it. I'm like, oh, let me go figure that out. And that was eye-opening.
Right.
And
It was the big aha moment.
yeah, very, very interesting article.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I don't know that I really I guess I hadn't thought that far in the future before. I just knew I was putting the money away. I never was like, I'm going to retire at this age and this is how much money I need. I just never thought about it. And then once I found this community, I was able to answer all those questions that
Well,
clearly needed to be answered. Yeah.
and now you just saw the pyramids like last year for your
Oh,
birthday.
yeah.
So,
I know. Yeah. Traveling and having a good time. Just moved to part-time. So I'm starting to downshift.
yeah.
So I'm curious about the point in time where you decided, I don't want to be living in poverty my whole life. I'm going to do better. How do you get over that mindset? Because there are so many people who can't get over that. This is my lot in life. I guess this is always how it's going to be. And they don't look for anything better. How do you
Well, that's sort of
get
one of
over
the
that?
questions I have is that I've always questioned, like, why was I able to do that when nobody else around me was? And I still don't know that I have an answer to that. I just knew that life was not going to be acceptable to me. And I had to do what I had to do. And, all of my peers from high school were going to a college. So, of course, I was going to go to college. I mean, of course, if I want to get a good paying job, that's what I've got to do. And kind of just modeled my life after what I saw other successful people doing. Because I didn't really have, like I said, any mentors or anybody much in my family to like mold my path or model myself after.
So after you decided that pre-med wasn't for you, did you have any struggles with that? Because, I mean, doctors are rich.
I know.
You could have been rich.
You know what's funny? The only reason I think I chose pre-med, so the house we lived in growing up, we didn't own it. This doctor owned this farm. And basically my dad had worked out a plan to live there for free in exchange for taking care of the property. And in my world, he was the only person that like wasn't poor, right? To me, he was rich. And he's the only person I knew in that world. And he was a doctor. So I think that's honestly, I wasn't really that interested, I don't think, in being a doctor.
Okay.
I just knew doctors made good money and I didn't want to be poor.
That makes so much sense. Doctors are rich, therefore I'll be a doctor.
Right. And then I started taking the classes and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not interested in this at all. I got to figure this out,
Which class did you not like? Because that was my path. I took chemistry, biology, and all that.
It might have been some sort of anatomy or something like that. It wasn't like, I love the science stuff, but learning about the human body, I don't know. I just kind of checked out.
Yeah. You dissected a frog. You're like, I'm out. Or a fetal pig or whatever they do now. One thing I think is interesting with you, which I'm saying it's interesting because we can relate to it as well, because I think we were already doing all the things, and then we read some article about Mr. Money Mustache or whatever, and that just put a name to what we were already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we discovered this, we already had significant savings. We're like, oh, this is interesting. There's other people doing this. But the other thing, I guess it did for us, was showed us what we could do. Like we were saving and we didn't know what we were going to do with the money.
Right.
So, but I want to back up a second before we get to that. When did you first discover FI? Do you remember? Was there a specific?
I think it was around 2018. I was visiting my good friend Eric, which I know you guys know as well. We were talking about money stuff. I've known this guy for more than 20 years. I mean, we talk about everything. And he mentioned something about fire as if I knew what it was. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, it stands for, he started getting into the whole thing. He had this book he gave me. I don't remember it's not one of the main books. I don't remember what it was, but it gave me this sort of overall introduction. And when you're like us and you're naturally frugal and you're a saver, I mean, as soon as you find this community, you immediately go down the rabbit holes, right? I mean, am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So I immediately connected to this concept. I immediately went out and found all the books, all the podcasts, and just kind of went down the rabbit hole. Mainly in the beginning, it was Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins and the Choose a 5 podcasts, and was just devouring all this information. And then within a few years, I know Eric retired. He went to his first in-person event, and then he was like, oh, I went to this camp. It was so fun. There's one next summer in Colorado Springs. You should go. And I was like, okay. And you guys, I have never in my life, I'm going to get emotional, felt like I fit in.
Oh.
And this is the first time in my life that I felt like I found my people. Because it's so hard as an adult, first of all, to make a new friend at all.
Yes.
Second of all, to make a new friend that you feel like you have anything in common with, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we're a little countercultural, let's be real, right? So I've never, I always have like a random friend over here, a random friend. I never really felt part of something. And I get to camp, and it was immediately like walking into a room of 60 of my new best friends. And I didn't stop talking all weekend and listening. I lost my voice. I didn't get any sleep. It was the best weekend ever. So now I keep going to these events, and I've run our local group, getting people together, once a month, and going to camp here in another week or two. And I just love it so much.
And which camp is this? Let's give a shout out to this
Camp Phi. I've been to 2. This will be my 3rd one. I'm going to Camp Phi Mid-Atlantic. I've also been to a couple of economy events, which I love as well. I just love all of the in-person events because I just love being around my people. Like I said, once you find your tribe, it's kind of addictive.
Yes.
My husband keeps saying, like, you're totally going to move to Longmont, aren't you?
Become fully assimilated into the cult.
That's what he says.
If anybody wants to move to Longmont, I'm a real estate agent and I focus solely on Longmont. So reach out, Mindy at mindyonmoney.com. But yeah, that is awesome. And I know exactly what you're talking about because in today's society, you're keeping up with the Kardashians and all these people that are buying these things. And you're like, I don't identify with these people at all. I've watched 0 minutes of Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Same.
Because I just can't stand the idea that they're all in competition with each other to show how much money they can spend. I mean, I already lived in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was called Colorado. Like, we moved into this neighborhood when we first moved to Colorado, and it was like we hadn't even discovered financial independence yet. And we're looking around, we're like, we have the oldest cars in the neighborhood, and one of them is 2 years old. We feel so uncomfortable in this neighborhood. Yeah. There was one car that was older, and it was like a collectible car, so that doesn't even count. It was so uncomfortable to be in this neighborhood and just watching all of these people having this unwritten contest with everybody about how much money can I show everybody that I'm sending. And I'm like, I don't identify with any one of these people in this neighborhood. We were there 2 weeks, and we looked at each other, and it was so bad. We're like, do you want to move back to Wisconsin?
There's also this idea that you're just supposed to be friends with people that you are just around for whatever reason. Like, I don't have kids, but, you know, everybody, like, they're just friends with all their kids' friends' moms. And, like, who's to say that you have anything in common with those people?
Do not.
Right? So that was just kind of my thing, is like, the people that I worked with, well, I'd have a couple friends at work. I'm not saying I don't have any friends at work, but I just was always, I don't know, outsider feels like a strong word, but I just never found my people until I found this group. And it's brought me such joy. Just last weekend, we had a 5-person that reached out to me from the community. Hey, I'm coming in from Seattle. And then that turned into a few other people that don't live too far from St. Louis. Hey, we're going to come in too. We're going to turn into this whole thing. And we had this little mini Phi meetup for a couple days. Somebody posted the pictures. I'm like, this just makes my heart happy.
Yes.
And isn't this crazy? So our whole trip now, we're here because of the Phi community. We went out to Richmond to attend a wedding from someone we met through the Phi community. While we were there, we met Brad Bear from Choose Phi.
Okay.
And then I said to you, hey, we're coming through St. Louis. Let's do something.
Let's do something.
Here we are. We're going to have an event tonight. And it's pretty weird. Like, we still have friends that aren't in the community, but yeah, most of our life revolves around Phi stuff now, right?
Yeah, and
Which is strange and weird.
If anybody's listening and, you know, you think, wow, that sounds like a cult. It's not a cult. We don't just sit around and talk about 401ks and Roth
We really
IRAs.
don't.
We actually don't talk much about money unless somebody comes, you know, to Eric had a friend over last night and he had a lot of questions about Phi. I'm like, ooh, ask me anything. I love talking about this. But for the most part, like at Camp Phi, maybe somebody has a question.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of conversation that is not about money and financial independence. And it's more about like, what are you doing now with your life and
But
how are you
also,
living?
I feel like if your thoughts on money align, or your values rather, that you find a lot of your other values align as well. And that's what was so amazing to me is, yeah, we have this in common, but as you start talking to everybody, you're just like, oh my God, these are my people. You just have so many other things that you were able to connect on.
Yeah, you said values. You didn't say money values. You just said values. And that's what it is. Everybody kind of has the same values on most things. And it's just another way that you can find an adult friend. I mean, how many adult friends have we met outside of the Phi community? I'm trying to think. 0?
Yeah, right.
Like an Aaron at Red Rock. So we're like 2 in 3 decades. And they're fantastic people.
And
they
I
are
love
fantastic.
that no matter where you are in the country or almost the world anymore, you can reach out and be like, hey, I'm coming through. And I'm going to, you know, just a few weeks ago, we were in Arizona. I knew somebody out there. Hey, let's meet up for lunch. And then, you know, it just turns into, it's the best. I love it so much.
It really is.
Us too. Whenever we travel, we go to the local Choose Phi group.
Yeah.
Ask to become a member. And then we're like, hey, we're going to be in town next weekend. Anyone want to meet up? And we've met some great people. We met David and Los Angeles last time, and I got to do some neat stuff from meeting him. And
well, you said you were coming in, and I was like, well, you know, our local Choose a Phi group's been talking about going to a Cardinals game. What if we can just combine all of that? And it just so happened that the game is here, you know, while you're in town. So I think we've got 22 tonight.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we've got 22 going. They all want to see you.
And I think they want to see you online. And our name is going to be on the scoreboard
I
or
think
something.
so, because we did I think if you buy more than 20 seats or whatever, the group, they put your name on the scoreboard.
That's awesome.
I think it'll just say choose FI St. Louis or something.
Okay.
I hope we catch it. We'll have to take a picture.
I know. Well, hopefully we do catch it. We'll probably be talking and we'll miss it. We'll see it, and then by the time our camera's up, it'll disappear to like a Budweiser commercial or something. God, like, do they zoom in on us in the
I
stands?
don't know. I'm not sure. It's going to be a surprise for all of us.
Hooray. So I want to know how you actually reached financial independence. You knew enough to put your money in the 401k to get the match.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make you financially independent.
And you said you never made a lot of money. Like, come on.
No.
I fully acknowledge I'm a tech bro. I made good money, and you did not.
Right. No, I didn't. Like I said, I was about mid-30s before I was just broke. Zero, right?
Right. But it didn't take you that long to reach financial independence.
Well, I'm not technically there, but I'm very close. We're like 80% FI at this point.
Okay.
And I just was able to back down to part-time thanks to, in all honesty, my husband's job. I'm kind of like husband semi-retired, part-time FI, right?
It's okay to rely on your spouse a little bit.
No, logistically, here's what happened. And thanks to, I would have never thought about this option in a million years if it wasn't for this community. I went to my first camp. Right after my first camp, I was able to set a retirement date. After my second camp, I had this idea, maybe I could go part-time eventually. Okay, so now I'm part-time. How I got there was, I'm like, okay, here's where we are now. If we use an 8% rate of return, my husband wants to retire in 2028. Do we get to our number if we do not contribute another dollar? And the answer was yes. And we were contributing a lot of dollars. We were putting away a lot. So basically, we were just able to decrease what we were putting into all those retirement accounts and shift that into the Kristen bracket. So for the first time ever, I'm not 100% financially independent, which has been an interesting thing with my husband because, we've been together for 14 years. And it's always been my money, my bills, his bills, 100% separate. And now he supports about 40% of my lifestyle. So we're working through it. It's been an interesting dynamic shift.
How does he feel about financial independence?
He thinks, you joked about the cult thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's only half a joke.
He thinks it's a little odd. He doesn't understand, but he's also not interested. I wouldn't say he grew up in a wealthy family, but he never wanted for anything. So he never really had to pay attention to money. It was just always there when he needed it. So he never just paid attention to this stuff or learned about it and doesn't care to because he didn't need to. So that's presented a few challenges over the years when I felt super frugal about something. I'm like, how much did you spend on that? I've loosened up about that over the years as I see our numbers trending in the right direction and we're good, But after I moved to part-time, there's sort of been this because I think the average person, if they literally cut their hours by 60%, which is what I've done, they then dial back their lifestyle. Right? I mean, that's what the normal person would do.
I would hope.
But my whole point was, well, I'm not going to do this if I have to dial back my lifestyle. I mean, the whole point is for me to be able to continue doing the things I love, more of the things I love with the extra free time that I have now. And I think he's had a hard time with that. Like, well, you're getting to have your cake and eat it too. Well, yeah, that's the point. But that's a buy thing, right? So he just we're getting there. One of his things was, well, what do I get? And I'm like, well, you don't want to retire. He's like, well, yeah, I know, but like, what do I get? Well, he's going to test drive a new truck today. Ooh. So I'm like, okay, you're going to get this truck and I'm going to hear less about this now, right? He's like, we're almost even. I'm like, okay. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Is it a Cybertruck?
No. It is not a Cybertruck.
So that's pretty interesting because you're not exactly on the same page. And we get this question all the time. It might be one of the number 5 questions. Like one person in the relationship will discover FI and they'll be like, oh, I love this. Tim Ferriss, Mr. Money Mustache, blah, blah, blah. And my partner could not care less. And to try to reconcile that could be pretty difficult. Right?
It's been challenging.
Yeah. But it sounds like you found a way.
I feel like, here's the thing, and he will tell you, he is not good at math. He is not the numbers person in this family. He's a firefighter. He breaks things, right? I'm the numbers person. I'm the science girl. So.
And he fights the actual fires. Not
yes.
Financial independence.
Right. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification. Yes. So, I lay out the numbers and I explain, but then a couple weeks later, he's going to be like, well, I'm not going to have enough money left at the end of the month after I pay you. And I'm like, no, but you are. See, that's the numbers. He's like, well, if it works. And I'm like, no, it's going to work. These are the numbers, you know? And he's like, well, we'll see, you know? So I feel like after a few months of seeing that he's not completely broke by the end of the month and he's still able to pay his bills and not having to cut back at all, he'll get it and he'll relax a little bit more. But it's, you know, it's a shift. It's a big shift.
Have you combined anything?
Nothing. I know that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So, well, that is, there's a lot of conversation about, you know, I want to have it separate. I want to be together. You haven't combined anything. How does retirement look like?
I know.
Do you plan on on combining things after retirement?
Yeah, I actually asked him that somewhat recently. I was like, so when does your money and my money become our money? And he was like, well, I guess, you know, when we retire, but I don't know. I think part of it is we both are divorced. So I think there was some, you know, I don't know, you've been bitten. You just kind of want to make sure things stay separate and don't get too intertwined. But maybe then, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it's going to be fine. I mean, the good thing is like, he trusts me. He knows that I know the numbers and I know the math. And he's seen me be so frugal and so careful with money now for 14 years, he knows I'm not going to do anything silly. So he trusts me and he kind of lets me handle it. But he's just really resistant to new ideas the first time he hears them. And then once you continue to talk about it after a few months, then it kind of becomes his idea. You know how that works. Is that just a typical man thing or like is my husband?
I plead the fifth. Your man is right here.
No, I can see that, and I don't blame him. When I first heard about this fire thing, I'm like, oh, this is some like internet scam. This can't be real.
Right.
It's such a foreign thing to retire at 40. No one does that. No one in my normal life did anything like that.
He knows no one that has done this outside of my friend Eric. And he's just like, well, that's just not what people do. And I'm like, right, but if you don't have to, I try to explain. I feel like one day it's gonna click. But he has in his mind, well, this is our goal. We'll see if we get there because, I just mentioned it today. I was like, well, you're only going to have this truck for 4 years because then we're retiring and we're moving away. And he's like, well, we'll see about that. And I'm like, no, that's always been the plan. That's the plan, So our goal, well, my goal, he acts like he's on board. I don't know if he changes his mind on me, we're going to have some trouble. We'll worry about that another day. But the thought is he has a son, my stepson, who is, and he will be a sophomore in college this fall. He wants him to get launched, basically graduate and get launched. And then my husband seems like he would be okay with basically selling everything and moving abroad. So that's kind of our plan. But we've got to get my stepson through college first. So that's why the target date is like 2028. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
When you say abroad, do you mean Longmont?
If my husband won't let me move to Spain, then it might be Longmont. But Spain is kind of what we're eyeing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spain is pretty cool.
Will you come visit?
See?
Yay.
Yes.
Okay. Spanish.
I speak no Spanish.
Do you speak Spanish?
When I was in college, I spent a summer studying in Mexico. I got pretty good at it. I was the person everybody came to and like, tell the cab driver where to take us, But that was also like 30 years ago. So, occasionally when I go to Mexico, I'm able to ask where the bathroom is. But I think I'd be able to pick it back up pretty quickly, though.
Yes, you probably would, especially if you're immersed.
Right.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. That is a perfect segue into where we were going. What does post-fi life look like for you?
Oh,
Sounds like abroad.
That's what we want to do is being the weather person that I am, weather is very important. And I feel like a nice sunny day with low humidity in the 70s, like that brings me joy, right? Where can I move where we get a lot of that?
Longmont.
Well, not a huge fan of snow. So I basically was like, okay, where can I get Southern California weather without the Southern California price tag? So I started cross-referencing climate types around the world. And the Southern Mediterranean is full of places that have this same climate. So then I started looking at, cost of living and other expat type things you'd be looking at. And Spain's kind of where we landed.
So you combined your science nerdery with your mathematical nerdery and came upon Spain.
Right.
Yes.
And Portugal would be a close second, but I think Portuguese would be a lot harder than Spanish, and they eat a lot more fish there, and I don't like seafood.
Okay, well, there you go. That is a well thought out plan, which I love. I really start to cringe when people start saying, I'm going to do this. I'm like, do you know anything about that? It doesn't seem like you do, but this sounds like, you know, or they're like, I'm going to do this because somebody else did it too.
No.
Well, okay, that's great, but is it something you're going to like? So you have done you've done the math.
Lots of research.
Figuratively and literally, and have come up with a plan based on actual preferences and knowledge versus, you know, somebody said they were going to retire to Spain, so I'm going to do it too.
I tend to overthink things.
Wow, what a unique trait here in the FI community.
Plot twist. And
Wait, do you like spreadsheets too?
Actually, believe it or not, I have never used a spreadsheet in my life.
Oh my goodness, give back your FI card.
Oh boy.
There'll never be FI if you don't
I
do
know.
spreadsheets out the wazoo.
I just write it down. Maybe a Word document. That's about as far as I get. I am not particularly technically inclined.
Huh.
Not at all.
You mentioned you're frugal about some stuff. What are you frugal about, and what do you spend money on freely?
My favorite things in the world are travel and good food. So I'm happy to spend money on those things. However, I still do travel sort of in a frugal way because I do credit card hacking. But I don't cheap out. I mean, I'm staying at really nice places, but I'm just not having to pay for them because of the credit cards, right?
Same.
Yeah. So I feel like we're able to travel a lot more than we would be able to otherwise because of that. So yeah, travel and good food. And I will tell you this whole thing with my husband in the truck, if he would have brought this, to me 2 years ago, I would have probably lost my mind, right? But I've started to realize things like, you guys have been talking about it a lot in recent history. The whole FI community has this whole idea of you can loosen up a little bit. You've got the money, you can spend it, right? So by seeing, okay, we're fine. We're heading in the right direction. We're going to have enough, right? We can go and buy you a truck. So I've definitely loosened up about that kind of stuff. We had a big fight a few years ago because he wanted a new bike. And I was like, well, why don't you just fix the bike you have now? Ooh, that did not go over very well. So I've definitely loosened up a little bit about that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Mindy actually wants a Cybertruck, right?
0%.
Oh my gosh. Do you really think they look nice? You think that's
No.
a good look?
No, not at all.
They're
not
so
even a little
ugly,
bit.
Carl.
Yeah, I heard the designer talk about it, and there's a reason it looks like that. So I appreciated, they didn't make it look like that just to be weird. I think it looks weird too, and I'm not going to buy one. I'm not a truck person, but I can appreciate why they did it.
That's why we're not buying one, because you're not a truck person.
No one in this podcast wants to hear about that, so
we're not buying one because we're not ugly vehicle people. Although we do have a Honda Element, and that's pretty.
Is that ugly?
Yeah.
It's like a big box on wheels.
It's beautiful in an ugly way, or ugly in
Exactly.
a beautiful way.
The Cybertruck is just ugly in an ugly way.
No, I think it's interesting.
It fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down.
Okay. We will wrap this up, but I have another question for you, and then I'll turn it back to Mindy. If you had, say you've got a 22-year-old relative who came to you and said, hey, I just graduated from college. I have no debt. I know, Kristen, you're smart about money. What should I do? And I promise to take your advice. What should I do for the next decade? What would you tell them?
Well, you better at least put in enough money in your 401k to get that free match, right? I mean, that's like the golden rule.
Yeah.
And we would sit down and figure out what their expenses were and figure out how much they could afford to put away, right? I'd probably Google, because I'm not sure off the top of my head, like what's a realistic percentage of your income to spend on housing, and make sure that we stayed under that number when they were looking for their place. Because we know the housing and transportation are the big ones, right? I would talk to them about transportation, obviously. I would talk to them about not falling into the DoorDash trap too much, right? That stuff gets out of whack so quickly. Convenience stuff, right? So I'd probably talk to them about some budgeting issues, but definitely the minimum would be the match in the 401k. And depending on what their salary was at their new job, I would tell them to, do a Roth IRA. I would probably tell them to go ahead and start a traditional brokerage too, so they can spread out stuff equally. Maybe not equally, but at least have all those different types of tax buckets going on. That's something I didn't pay enough attention to when I was younger.
Okay. What would you have done different?
Well, I probably just would have started a Roth IRA earlier. I probably would have started a traditional brokerage account a little bit earlier too, because you end up with so much of your net worth in the 401k, and you're like, oh, tax bomb, right? Things we learn about when we become part of the FI community.
It's a good thing your best friend is Mr. 72T.
Oh,
Eric Cooper.
yeah. Yeah, I could see us doing something like that at some point. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I'm very lucky. My husband has a 457 as a firefighter. Yeah.
Oh.
Which, if you don't know, that's kind of like a 401k, but it doesn't have that 59.5 thing. You can pull out the money as soon as you retire, even if you retire early, without the 10% penalty.
Yes, you're still paying taxes on the
Taxes,
withdrawal,
yes.
so long as it isn't the 457 Roth plan.
Right.
If he's got a 457 Roth, then you're not even paying taxes. You're just pulling money out as soon as you separate from service.
Yeah.
With the company that has the 457. I heard about that from Jamila Souffrant. I want to say it was episode 37 of the Bigger Pockets Money podcast, or maybe 31. She talked about it. I was like, wait, what's a 457? She's like, oh, it's this plan. It's just like your 401k. You can contribute to the same amount, but then when he leaves, because her husband had it too, when he leaves, we can access that money. I'm like, I'm going to need to know a lot more about that.
So the idea is we sell our house, we have the equity in our house as a bridge, and then we have the 457 money as a bridge to get us to 59.5 to then not have to pay the penalties for the rest of the money.
Oh,
that's our plan.
Okay. So how long have you lived in your house?
13 years.
Are you both on title?
Oh,
You
I don't
and your
know.
spouse?
Probably not.
Okay. So
Tell me what I need to know.
first you need to know how much you paid for it and how much it has appreciated.
I am aware of that number.
If it is more than $250,000, then you're going to want to add the other one of you to the title.
That's right, because it's 500.
It's $250 per person on title.
Oh,
So if it's more than
Okay.
500,000, you can add his son,
okay.
and now you've got $750,000.
I think we have about 300K in equity in the house.
Okay, so
I
then
would
you want to
definitely
make sure that you're both on title because
Okay.
you both have to be on title for at least 2 years and have lived in it as your primary residence. And then
Okay.
you sell it as a primary residence, and then you're paying no capital gains taxes on that 500,000.
This is very good information.
Yes. So now, since you're not going to sell it for at least 2 years, now is a great time to look at getting the other of you on the title if
Okay.
you're not.
I need to figure that out.
Yes.
Who do I call?
You can look at your closing documents.
Okay.
I think you can go to your county website or your
Okay.
city website and see who owns the house.
Okay.
And it'll just
make sure
say-
both of our names are on
Yeah.
there. And if both
Yeah.
of our names are on there, we're good.
Yes. And if they're not, you can add it. You still have to be on title for 2
Okay.
years.
And I
before you
might
can
be. I'm just not, it's been since 2011. I just can't remember.
Why pay taxes on money that you
Right.
shouldn't, that you don't have to pay taxes on the money for?
Yeah.
So there you go.
So you can tell I've thought through most of this. That was one little thing I didn't know about.
There's
but
little
I
tips
thought
that you need
through.
to see. Now, this
most of
is
it.
the power of Camp 5 because
Yeah.
there is always somebody who knows something that you don't, and
Yes.
then they can share it with you. So we do talk about money sometimes at Camp 5. It's not
But
all
you
money
tell
all the time.
somebody your plan, and then if there's a hole to be found in your plan, they can bring that to your attention and save you a lot of trouble.
Yes. Or at least send, hey, I know a little bit about this. You're going to have to learn more. Hey,
Yeah.
I didn't know it at all. So now I can go down the rabbit hole. Yeah. All right. So I think that wraps up this
Is
episode.
it time for a baseball game?
Yeah,
It's
that's
going to be
good.
time for a baseball game. Go Cardinals, because we're in St. Louis. And thank you, Kristen,
Thank you guys for having me.
for
Thank you.
joining us. This was awesome. Thank you for listening to the Mindy on Money podcast. Mindy
And Carl
on Money podcast.
and Kristen.
And Kristen, tune in next week when we interview Kristen's friend, Eric, Mr. 72T Cooper.
Okay, so this is for the outtakes. Who is going to win the game tonight? It is 3:36. The game is 6:45. Orioles, who have a good
Orioles by
record.
2.
Yeah, Orioles are like 30 and 15 or
That's
something like that.
my guess. Orioles by 2.
Okay.
I'm going to root for the home team and say Cards by 1.
Okay.
Wait, and St. Louis is famous. I love sweets. I don't like this about myself, but those hot butter buns, what are those things?
Butter
called?
Gooey butter cake?
Yeah,
Oh,
butter cake.
I'd butter buns.
You told us where to go last time we were here, and Claire and I went to that place, and it was great. That little bakery.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Gooey butter cake. Surely there's somewhere at the stadium that sells that. They've got a lot of good food at the stadium.
Okay.
We'll find something.
Really? What else is St. Louis known for? What kind?
Toasted ravioli. Emo's pizza and Provel cheese. I don't like it. I don't get it. It's a different kind of cheese. It's like, it's a thing. But it's mostly, gooey butter cake and toasted raviolis.
Okay.
Yeah, gooey butter cake.
You
is
need to find a way to eat both of those tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mindy learned about liver mush this
What?
weekend. Have you ever
Tell
heard
me
of that?
about that?
That's not a St. Louis thing, is it?
No, that's a Louisville thing.
No, I've said it's like Midwest, like Cincinnati, Louisville. Yeah, Eric.
Well, that's in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's not.
I lived in Louisville, and I don't remember this stuff. He might have been pulling Earl's leg.
Yeah, sometimes Carl makes up words.
It has to be true.
He made us Geta. Guetta?
Oh, Geta.
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 That was delicious.
Really? Now, see, I thought Geta was more of a Cincinnati thing.
It actually is. I looked it up, and it is like oatmeal mixed with meat.
Yeah, it's a weird meat patty, right?
Yes, it was. I thought it was tasty.
Yeah.
This is what makes America great.
So I want to know, who's your favorite friend, me or Eric? No, I'm kidding. I would never do that. I would never do that.
You, of course. All right, I'm gonna hit stop.
We should have Eric. Why do we call it the show Mindy on Money?
Because Mindy is a bit much.
Mindy. You should have just thrown like 10 more Mindys in there. I know you would have liked that.
That's even more. That's way too much.
How about Mindy to like the power of like 5 million or something? Just
How many people are going to listen to that? Zero.
Infinite
That one
Mindy.
weirdo on Facebook that's going to...
the collecting Mindy's guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I once got a Facebook request from somebody. I'm like, I don't recognize this person. So I clicked on his like friend list, and it was only people named Mindy. I was like, ooh, you're going to collect me as a... Like, you're going to wear my skin as a hat. No, I'm not going to accept that.
You should have totally went with it.
Ugh.
Anyway.